Far out in the South Atlantic, there is a place most people will never visit, not because it is forbidden, but because it is far, very far. Saint Helena is one of the most isolated inhabited islands on Earth, known to the world for one man who could not escape it. But beyond history books, this island hides a very different reality. Today, we will see how one of the most remote islands on Earth lives, the price paid for its calmness, and why a project worth hundreds of millions is still called the most useless airport in the world. Saint Helena is a small island located in the southern Atlantic Ocean. It does not lie near any continent, and it is far from popular travel routes. To the west lies South America. To the east, Africa. Thousands of kilometers of open ocean separate the island from the rest of the world. In practice, Saint Helena exists as an isolated place, almost like a world of its own. Administratively, the island is part of a British overseas territory, together with Ascension Island and the Tristan da Cunha archipelago. On a map, they may look connected. In reality, they are separated by vast distances. What unites these islands is their origin. They did not break away from continents. They rose from the ocean floor. Saint Helena is the exposed peak of an ancient volcano that pushed its way above the surface millions of years ago. That is why the island's terrain is so uneven and dramatic. The interior is elevated and green. Temperatures are cooler there. Clouds and mist are common. Vegetation is dense. Closer to the coast, the landscape changes completely. Rain becomes rare. Winds grow stronger. Shade almost disappears. Within just a few kilometers, the island shifts from lush highlands to dry, rugged slopes. Geography defines everything here. Life on Saint Helena has never been easy. Every delivery, every connection with the outside world, and every attempt at development has always required effort. Isolation is not a consequence of history. It is the foundation on which the island exists. In the early 16th century, Saint Helena appeared on European maps. Portuguese sailors were the first to record its existence. At the time, the island had no permanent population. Ships stopped here only briefly to collect fresh water, repair damage, or wait for better weather. For many decades, Saint Helena remained empty, but as ocean travel expanded, its position became valuable. The island sat near important sea routes, connecting Europe, Africa, and Asia. In the 17th century, Britain took control of Saint Helena. From that moment on, the island began to change. Administration was handed to the British East India Company, a powerful trading organization that operated like a state of its own. Saint Helena turned into a regular stopping point for ships returning from India and the Far East. Vessels arrived constantly, supplies were exchanged, crews rested before continuing their journey. Over time, the island developed a permanent community. People from different parts of the world passed through or stayed behind. Sailors, merchants, soldiers, former enslaved people, and hired workers all left traces of their cultures. This constant movement shaped a population that was unusually diverse for such a remote place. However, the island's prosperity depended entirely on global maritime traffic, and that dependence would later become its greatest weakness. At the beginning of the 19th century, Saint Helena suddenly became a place of global importance. After Napoleon's defeat, European powers faced a serious problem. They needed a location where escape would be impossible. Not a prison, not a fortress, a place defined by distance. The choice was Saint Helena. The island was far from Europe, far from allies, and far from any major sea routes. Napoleon was brought here under strict British supervision. He lived inland, away from the coast and the port, constantly monitored. His final years were spent in isolation, illness, and reflection. In May 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died on the island. Ironically, this short chapter became the most famous moment in Saint Helena's history. The island's name was permanently tied to the final days of one of the most powerful figures the world had ever known. But once Napoleon was gone, Saint Helena slowly faded from global attention. In 1869, the opening of the Suez Canal changed world trade forever. Ships no longer needed to stop in the middle of the Atlantic. Traffic declined sharply. The port lost its purpose. Economic activity collapsed. An island that once thrived on global movement was left behind by it. Saint Helena turned from a strategic hub into a remote outpost, existing on the margins of the modern world. Today, just over 4,000 people live on Saint Helena. It is a small community where most people know each other or are connected through family and friends. The island's population is the result of centuries of movement. British and Portuguese settlers, Africans, Indian, and Chinese workers all became part of a shared history. This mix created a local identity that feels distinct from both Europe and Africa. The main town is Jamestown. Officially, it is the capital of the island. In reality, it feels more like a quiet settlement. Jamestown sits in a narrow valley between steep cliffs. The town stretches lengthwise with little space to expand. For many years, this was the only gateway to the island. Everyone arriving by sea passed through the same port, the same streets, and the same small center of activity. Life on St. Helena moves slowly. Crime is rare. People trust each other. Cars are often left unlocked. Children walk outside without constant supervision. Nature is always close. If it is not visible from your window, it is only a short drive away. But isolation brings limits. Jobs are scarce. Career choices are few. Changing professions is not always an option. Many residents leave the island to work abroad, sending money back home or returning after several years. Living costs are high. Most goods must be imported. This makes prices unpredictable. Basic products can disappear from stores for weeks. Sometimes there is no alternative. Internet access exists, but it is expensive and slow. This affects daily life, especially for younger people who feel cut off from the outside world. Still, islanders adapt. Hiking, fishing, and diving are common ways to spend free time. Local events and small celebrations help maintain a sense of community. Life here is a balance between peace and limitation, between safety and isolation. For most of its modern history, St. Helena was connected to the outside world by sea alone. A single supply ship linked the island with South Africa. The journey took several days one way and required patience, planning, and time many people did not have. Because of this, the idea of building an airport had been discussed for decades, but it was not until 2016 that the project finally became reality. The airport was built on the eastern side of the island. From the beginning, it was an engineering challenge. Limited space, uneven terrain, strong and unpredictable winds, and no nearby alternative airports. The total cost exceeded £280 million, an enormous sum for a community of just a few thousand people. Almost immediately, the airport became controversial. Powerful crosswinds made landings difficult. Plans to use larger aircraft were abandoned. Instead, smaller planes were introduced, carrying fewer passengers and flying less frequently. From an economic perspective, the airport will likely never pay for itself. This is why it is often labeled the most useless airport in the world. But for the people of St. Helena, the story is more complex. The airport changed how the island relates to distance. Medical evacuations became faster. Travel became possible without losing weeks at sea. Connections to the UK and Africa became more realistic. Tourism began to grow slowly. Visitors do not come for luxury or entertainment. They come for silence, for isolation, for the feeling of standing at the edge of the map. St. Helena will never be a mass tourist destination, and perhaps that is its strength. It is a place where history has not been erased by modern life, where distance still matters, and where the world feels quieter, slower, and more human.